When we hire A players and when we network and we position ourselves as an employer of choice for A players, we start attracting A players to our team. And that's what we want to do. And we want to build our businesses to be a place that A players want to work in. And so that means we need to understand the psychology of A players because they're different than warm bodies. But once we have A players on our team, that's where the 4 week vacation starts to become a reality because they will take more and more off our plate. We feel comfortable that they can handle things. And we can't just say, yo, we've got 4A players, so now I'm going to take a vacation. It doesn't quite work that way. But what we can start looking at is what can they take on that we're doing and that would allow us to be able to be away from the business and be fully unplugged.
Hello, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I am so excited today because we have a very, very special guest. We actually are bringing in one of my fellow Profit First professionals. And I'm telling you, she's like one of the OGs. She's like, well, I think the original Profit First professional, actually. Like I always tell people there was 20 people in the room when I started. I think Dr. Sabrina was like the it was just her and Mike when she started. But I'm so excited about our special guest today. We're bringing on Dr. Sabrina Starling. She is called the business psychologist. Yes. And she truly is a psychologist on the background. But in addition to being a psychologist, she's an international best-selling author. She's author of actually 3 books, How to Hire the Best. And she also has a contractor edition for that for you guys that are in construction, as well as the 4 week vacation. She's the founder of the Tap the Potential, and she's also the host of the Profit by Design podcast. And she and her team, what they do is they coach entrepreneurs to take back their lives from their businesses and create a life that work supports life, not the other way around. They are on a mission to send 10,000 entrepreneurs on a 4 week vacation. Wouldn't that be awesome? In the next 10 years. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Sabrina Starling to our platform. Hey, Dr. Sabrina, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Susanne. It's good to be here with you.
Well, I'm excited to talk about your new book. I see that on your background for you guys that are watching but the 4 week vacation. And, wouldn't it be nice for everyone to take a 4 week vacation and like really take a vacation and not think about it? And today we're going to talk about how do you take a 4 week vacation? What does building that look like? What does building a company and a team look like in order to create that? So thank you, Dr. Sabrina, for joining us today in this discussion.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to share with more entrepreneurs who are focused on creating profitable businesses. And I know that's your listeners are focused on that. And the beauty of the 4 week vacation is that step number one is profit first. So that's the good news for everyone listening is, hey, if you're doing profit first, you're on your way. And what I've really I've been working on for the last 18 years trying to figure out how do you grow a profitable business that doesn't take over your life? Because every small business owner that I encounter, when they talk about growth, it's a mixed bag. And I've even had lots of conversations with business owners who say, I don't want to grow. It's hard enough at this level of revenue. And if I had to add more, then we have to add more team and all the headaches and the employee issues that come along with that. So step number one for me into figuring out how do you set this business up so that it can grow and not take over your life was the awareness that most of the stress that we experience in small business has to do with team members and hiring and managing and dealing with employee problems and performance issues and on and on and on. And when we start thinking about if there's a solution for that, then all of a sudden life gets a lot easier. And what I've come to learn over the years is that payroll is the biggest expense outside of rent, usually in a business. And so if we can get better at hiring A players, our investment in our payroll actually becomes profitable. And if we don't have A players on our team, it's not profitable. It's bleeding cash out the business. And I know you don't like that. No one likes that. And so the first books that I wrote were the How to Hire the Best books. And when I started writing those books, there were no, back in the day, makes me feel really old when I say that, but back in the day, there were no books for small business owners on how to hire A players. Top Grading is a great resource, and it really is written from the perspective that you are working in a corporate environment and you have an entire HR team to support you in the hiring process. Most small business owners, we don't have that. And so I thought, well, okay, how do we do this? How do we take some of what works in top grading and that we know works really well and make it doable in a small business? So that was one piece of it. But then I also thought, you know what? I want to see if I can find small business owners who have A players on their team and interview them. And maybe they could tell me how they got these A players on their team. Well, time and again, they would turn me down for interviews. And I just got curious and I said, "How come you don't want to be interviewed?" And they said, "Well, it's because I really don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I got Joe and Mary and Billy on my team. And if I had to repeat that, I don't know where I would even start. It was just kind of accidental." And so I said, "Okay, would you just tell me the story of how each one of them came to be on your team?" So I just started collecting all these stories. And then one evening, I was in my living room and I laid out all the stories on the floor. And I thought, I wonder if I can group these into patterns. Like, are there some patterns here? And sure enough, I had like 5 or 6 different groups. And I realized, oh my gosh, where there's a pattern, there's a system. And so every business owner who was hiring A players were doing some things that seemed accidental. And it was actually just really good networking that led them to have the A players in their businesses. And so I thought, how can we take that really good networking and turn it into a system of a step by step, like here's what you do. And that's how I came to write the How to Hire the Best, the first book. And it was written for rural business owners because I was living in a rural area and I thought this is mostly a rural business owner problem. But as soon as that book came out, I realized it's not a rural problem, it's everywhere. And so that's when I went on to write How to Hire the Best, the contractor's edition, because I had a lot of clients in the construction industry dealing with this issue. And then as that book came out, I had lots of people like Susanne, an accountant, a CPA, helping me promote How to Hire the Best Contractors Edition. How to Hire the Best Contractors Edition became an international bestseller. That totally blew me away. And I was like, what is going on here? Why is this so popular? Why is this book so popular? And what I realized is every small business owner needs a book for hiring. And so that's how I wrote the latest book in the How to Hire the Best series. And that's the Entrepreneur's Ultimate Guide to Attracting Top Performing Team Members. And what this comes down to is when we hire A players and when we network and we position ourselves as an employer of choice for A players, we start attracting A players to our team. And that's what we want to do. And we want to build our businesses to be a place that A players want to work in. And so that means we need to understand the psychology of A players and because they're different than warm bodies. But once we have A players on our team, that's where the 4-week vacation starts to become a reality because they will take more and more off our plate. We feel comfortable that they can handle things. And we can't just say, yo, we've got 4 A players, so now I'm gonna take a vacation. It doesn't quite work that way. But what we can start looking at is what can they take on that we're doing and that would allow us to be able to be away from the business and be fully unplugged. So this is a long way of answering your original question is how do we set ourselves up to take a 4-week vacation? Get those A players on the team is step one. But step two is to think, okay, what's the longest time you've been able to be away from the business fully unplugged? And just for some perspective, I'll give you some data. I've been researching entrepreneurship and burnout for the last 4 years. We've got data now from over 700 entrepreneurs. We've analyzed data on 235 of them. When we ask entrepreneurs, what's the longest you've been able to be away from your business fully unplugged? Susanne, do you want to take a guess at the most frequently reported response to that question?
Probably 1 week, right? I would imagine. And it probably
I
isn't the week that
wish.
payroll's being run, right?
Yeah,
No.
right. 1 week. No, it's 0 days. That is the most frequent reported response, 0 days, fully unplugged. And so that means they're taking vacation, but they bring their laptop, they bring their cell phone, they sit on the beach and they run payroll. That's the most frequent reported response. And the average length in business of those we've surveyed is 12 years. So, like, just imagine 12 years in business and never being able to fully unplug. It's just awful. And so when we start working with business owners to take time off in their business, we start with what's the longest you've been able to be away fully unplugged? And if they say 0 days, we say, okay, next week, you're going to schedule a day off and you're going to tell your team you're going to be out of the office and you're not going to be available. So whatever comes up, they need to handle it. And so that forces you to think about, well, what's going to come up? What do I do that's essential? And who else on the team can do it? And if you have A players, absolutely somebody on your team can do it. And so we need to start documenting and systematizing and training team. And the beautiful thing is, every business owner that takes their first fully unplugged day off comes back and says, "That was amazing. And my team handled this weird thing happened, and my team handled it because they're A players and they're going to come up with solutions." And so that just builds the confidence like, oh, you could do this again. And so you just keep increasing. So if you take one day off, then you go up to 3 days. And I don't recommend a gradual, like we're not going to do 1 day to 2 days. This can take you forever to get to a 4 week vacation. But, go to 3 days and then go to a full week and then 2 weeks and then 3 weeks and then 4 weeks. And every time you take that unplugged time off, you pay attention to what fell apart while you were gone and create a system, train your team, and that way it's handled. And now here's the real secret to a successful 4 week vacation. Whenever you delegate something because you're away, don't take it back. And this is very real. I've done it. I took a 9 week maternity leave 10 years ago. And I remember in week 6 sobbing on the phone with my coach saying, "I don't want to go back. This is so wonderful. I'm enjoying my little baby." And basically our conversation was along the lines of, "You got to suck it up, buttercup. You're going back." And make the best of it. And what can you savor and enjoy now so that when you go back. And both of us completely missed that I had delegated all kinds of things to my team. And yes, I was going back, but I didn't have to take it all back. And that's the key. And so when we come back, we feel like, oh, our clients have missed us. They must be chomping at the bit for us to come back. My clients, yeah, they were happy when I was back, but they were perfectly well served by the other coach. And they were getting value there too, because that coach had a different perspective. And the other thing is when we have A players and we delegate something to them and then we take it back, we are sending this message to them that says, we don't trust you. We don't think you can fully handle this. And so we're undermining their confidence. Their greatest A players love it when you go away and everything goes smoothly, or if there's problems, they can say, this problem came up and we handled it. Everything's fine now. That's their greatest satisfaction. And so I have come to believe that those of us who say, yes, we are about growing leaders and empowering others, yet we don't want to take vacation, we are reinforcing a glass ceiling on our team because we're holding on to things that they could be doing and showing their competence and feeling really great about.
Oh, wow. That is so good. And, it's true, Dr. Sabrina. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed with A players is they're not looking to stagnate, right? They're not looking to do the same thing for the next 20 years. They're looking to grow. They're looking to go into management. They're looking to, how do I run a company, whether it's your company or somebody else's, they're looking to go places in their career. And, giving them more responsibilities, giving them more things that require thought leadership and challenge and problem solving, that's like giving them like a Sunday, right? That's like dessert
Yes.
for these people. So, and I love how you gave the acronym of, a glass ceiling. None of us want to create a glass ceiling, especially not
No.
on our own companies and our own
No.
selves, right? And so let's bust through that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And
And
you said it so well about the thought leadership. This is an area we're exploring on the Tap the Potential team right now. So I have the Profit by Design podcast. We've dropped an episode every week for the last 5 years, and that's been me dropping an episode every week for 5 years. And when I go on vacation, guess who's recording episodes in advance? And it takes a lot of time to record. If I'm going to go 4 weeks, four episodes in advance. And so recently, in the last couple of months, A players on my team are stepping in and running the podcast in my absence, and they are showing their thought leadership. And it has been amazing. They come across as so strong and so confident, and they're bringing a different perspective to the same topics that I talk about, but they're talking about it from an A player team member's perspective, which has a ton of value. They're also bringing in their, like Caitlin, who co-facilitates the How to Hire the Best course with me. She's going to be talking this week on the Profit by Design podcast on the internship opportunity in business. And that's a topic I've never covered. And it's a great way to fill open roles in your business. So this is her area where she gets to shine and be the expert and learn this because she's going to be teaching it to our clients in the How to Hire the Best course.
Wow, that's even different. Like actually having them run the podcast in your absence. I mean
Yes.
that is the Dr.
Yes.
Sabrina hour, that they're going to be running. Oh my goodness. That's a real big passing down of the torch there, I
Yeah.
must say,
Well,
with that.
I watch it. I watch the numbers. The numbers are solid when we have our team members on the podcast. And so it's not like there's a drop off. And I don't want this to be the Dr. Sabrina show because if it is all about me, what happens when I go away? What happens when I retire? What happens when I want to sell the business at some point? If Tap the Potential is only Dr. Sabrina, it's not sustainable.
Right, right.
Right? There's no staying power. I feel like my job is I need to be the conduit for spreading these messages about work supports life and how you hire A players and how you build a profitable business that doesn't rely on you. That's my job in this world to spread that message, but I don't need to be the only one. And if we want 10,000 entrepreneurs to take a 4-week vacation in the next 10 years, I can't be the only one spreading that message because I can't do it alone. I need help getting there.
Yeah, that's a lot of Dr. Sabrina's there with 10,000 entrepreneurs. I don't think I want to take more than 10 personally one-on-one. But definitely that's a lot of Dr. Sabrina's and you definitely have to create many of you
Mhm,
or different versions of you to be able to
mhm,
show up and be able to provide that level of impact really
mhm.
with that. So Dr. Serena, let's take a peel back. I think all of us want a 10-week vacation, right? For you guys out there that have never taken a vacation, my heart goes out to you. I've been there. I think I was like 4 years in my business before I took a vacation and then I went on a
Yeah.
cruise. And the only reason I went on a vacation is then the internet worked, right? Um, and I couldn't really plug in. Even though I brought my computer, I couldn't do it. So my heart definitely comes out to you guys. You definitely read Dr. Sabrina's book to get started on that. But let's talk about where things go wrong, right? Because,
Yeah.
we've all said, I'm taking a vacation this week. This year I'm changing my life and life happens. So let's talk about where do things go wrong and how do we get around that as entrepreneurs?
The biggest area where things go wrong is a team member quits the week before you want to take a vacation. That happens so often. And what I've really come to understand is that when we don't feel confident in our ability to hire A players, we hang on to our warm body team members for years. And we try to coach them up and improve their performance. And the more we up level, so those of us, like I know you get coaching, I get coaching, we're always up leveling ourselves. And the more we up level, the less those team members are going to be happy on our team because we have expectations and we have performance standards and there's accountability now. And so what will happen is those team members will quit because it's uncomfortable or we'll end up firing them at some point. Most of us don't fire a team member before we take a vacation. By the way, I don't recommend that. But usually they'll quit and it usually happens when we are getting ready to take some time off, and so that creates this level of chaos. So the big lesson on that is to stop tolerating lack of performance, lack of accountability, deal with it, and if they don't respond positively and you see a steady increase in performance, terminate them and release them. They may be an A player on someone else's team. Like they just may not be a good fit for you. But the longer you keep them on, the more you're setting yourself up for some sabotaging moment to happen. And it usually happens at a critical time in the business. So that's one of the big things that goes wrong. And the best antidote to that is to learn how to hire the best. And every time you hire, I always talk about building your hiring muscle. So every time you hire, pay attention to what went well, do more of that, pay attention to what didn't go well, learn from it, and improve that next time. And so you're building your hiring muscle as you go. And the more confident you get in your ability to hire A players, the easier it is to say to an underperforming team member, here's your performance improvement plan. You have 4 weeks. We're going to meet every week. You've got to show me your improvement. And if at the end of the 4 weeks you haven't improved, we're going to part ways. It's that simple. And then you can hire A players from there. So the other thing that will go wrong with 4 week vacations or 1 week vacations is saying to your team, I know you got this. Here's my cell phone just in case, right? Because inevitably there will be a need for them to reach out to you on your cell phone. And what you're doing at that point, we discount how disruptive that is to our peaceful state of mind because as soon as they call, we're pulled back in to whatever the situation is. And then we're going to ask them to follow up with us and give us an update, later the afternoon or the next day with however they handled the situation. And we have blown our peace of mind. The greatest benefit of any time off that's fully unplugged is that it is unplugged and our mind can go elsewhere and we have the opportunity to connect with ourselves and be present with ourselves. We have the opportunity to connect with those we love. We have the opportunity to just daydream. And sometimes we will have the best bolt from the blue ideas. I remember one time on a family vacation over the summer, I was out on the lake and I had this bolt from the blue idea. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought of that if I'd been sitting in my office. And those moments don't happen when we take time away and we allow contact with the business, but we're also undermining our team members' confidence that they can handle things. So I'm going to be away. I trust you guys. You've handled things. You've done it before. I know you can do it again. Another thing that goes wrong when we take time off is not everyone on the team understanding who's making decisions. So I have taken time off in the past, and we've had 3 people on the leadership team, and someone who was not on the leadership team didn't know who to take direction from and was getting conflicting messages from different people on the leadership team. So it needs to be really clear. You need to have a clear accountability chart. So someone who's in charge of operations handles this, the person who oversees marketing handles this, the person who oversees client delivery makes the final call on this. And it was a client delivery issue, and there was conflict between the sales and the client delivery person, and the other team member was like, I don't know. And I said, ultimately, the client delivery person, the leader in that seat, that's the person that needs to make the final call. So those kinds of issues, the more you can clarify roles and who's accountable for what, the better.
I love it. I love it. Now, you and I have been in business. We've probably seen this. I know I've seen it. There's just a team member that doesn't respect boundaries, right? Doesn't respect that. I guess they don't know either everything's a sense of urgency or they're not respecting that time off, right? For whatever reason, sending emails or like a text message or what to do. Or, it could be confidence, sometimes a lack of training, but usually, for what I find, it's just a lack of a conversation where that person understands their role really and
Mm-hmm.
respecting boundaries. And there are even team members that will blame their failure on you as a business leader, right?
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about that and creating that expectation that you are expected to really make executive decisions and run this without me being here.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one of the things we need to be mindful of is once we catch the delegation bug, and realize how good it feels to delegate and get things off our plate, we can start just delegating everywhere. And not every team member is ready for that. So the analogy that I give is imagine we're sitting on a seesaw. We're on one end and we have a team member on the other. And so we just hop off that seesaw because we've delegated. So we've hopped off. And, they were up in the air and now they're going to go flying down and hit their bottom. And so we have to set them up for success. There has to be some balance here. And so just letting them know, hey, I know in the past I ran everything and I made every decision on the team. I can't do that anymore. It's not working for me. It's wearing me out. And I don't think I make the best decisions that way. And you're over marketing. And I really want to start having you make the decisions, and I'll support you in making the decisions. But ultimately, these things are going to be your call. And so you have that conversation where you prep them for that. And then when they come to you with questions, our temptation is going to be, let me answer that question for you. Let me fix it. Let me solve it. And we have to put the imaginary duct tape over our mouths and ask the question of, what are your ideas about how to fix this? Or what are your ideas about how to handle this? What suggestions do you have? And then imaginary duct tape over our mouth and just let them talk through. And then usually they're going to have the right idea in there and say, you know what? I think you're right. That's a great idea. Let's go with it. And we just do that over and over. And then we need to reinforce to them after 3 or 4 times, like, you really made some good key decisions lately. I'm proud of you. And so using that messaging, I'm proud of you. I've got faith in you. I believe in you. That is key. And when they mess up, they will mess up. We've messed up. I mean, all of us mess up. Don't berate them. That's the worst thing that we can do. And a lot of times we will have team members who have been in previous jobs where they have tried to make decisions on their own and they've messed something up and somebody's yelled at them. Somebody has called them names, somebody's put them down. And so they're coming into our teams with that baggage. And so we need to constantly create a safe, supported environment. And so if we undermine that and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you screwed that up. What were you thinking? There's a good chance they won't take initiative in the future. So we have to be very mindful of what comes out of our mouth and avoid judgmental language. Always use charge neutral, like, oh, wow, that really sucks that happened. That's a big problem. You can acknowledge that, but you don't have to be hysterical, like, it's terrible and all this. But just say, yeah, that's not good that happened. What ideas do you have for us to fix this? What are you going to do? And coach them through that. The other
Oh,
piece around this, though, is that you said the employee who doesn't respect boundaries, who's calling you on your time off or on the weekends and asking questions. And I find it really helpful to give employees a container for where they're going to ask their questions. So one of the best things you can do is have a weekly one-to-one with each of your team members that you supervise. No more than 5. If you have more than 5, then you need another layer in your accountability chart because none of us can handle more than 5 direct reports. So a weekly one-to-one, and explain to them that's where they bring those issues and they are responsible for the agenda for that one-to-one. And then they know, okay, I can ask this here. I don't have to have the drive-by questions on Voxer or stopping in the office to ask. I can ask this. And so my team knows, 90% of their questions that they have go on the agenda for the one-to-one. And if it's an emergency, if it can't wait 5 days for a response, that would be something to send through and say, hey, I've got a question about this. But inevitably, I'm going to communicate to them, when you bring me a question, I want you to bring me the solution. And I'll tell you yes or no, I think. And if it's not a great solution, I'll say, let's think this through. What other, how can we make this a better idea? But it's really about empowering them and setting those clear boundaries around, here's when communication happens.
I love it. I love it. So it's before you go on that 4-week vacation, right? It's training
Oh,
them
yeah.
to take initiative with problem solving, creating boundaries when they can approach you with questions. And you'd be surprised. I mean, like, if you can't get your walking encyclopedia in front of you to answer your question immediately and you can think about it for a while, you'd be surprised how many answers one can come up with just
Yes.
with having to sit with it for a while, right?
Yes. Yeah. And one of the challenges I've had personally is when we onboard team members, we're very intentional during the first week and the first month to have multiple checkpoints with them throughout the week so they can ask all their questions. But then we've got to wean them off of that. And it's that weaning off where it's kind of a tough transition. And I want them to succeed. And so I don't want to make them wait. And it's really about me learning control for myself and communicating to them, yes, I know you sent me that Voxer and I didn't answer it until 3 days later because that was not a question that needed an immediate response. It can wait till a one-to-one.
I'm curious, do you ever have anybody respond negatively to having to wait for an answer?
No, it helps them organize their work too. So we have so much context switching that we do in our businesses and our team members do. And so when they learn the value of doing one thing at a time and not switching contexts all the time and how much more productive it makes them, it's a relief. I think they feel a sense of there's a workflow here and there's a sense of peace and calm. And we're not running around with this sense of emergency and urgency all the time.
I love it. I love it. So really simplifying the responsibilities so that they can
Hmm.
focus versus and really learn a job versus multitasking and doing a variety of different things.
Yes.
Really helps with that too. It's interesting because Dr. Serena, I've had amazing experience with employees and I've had some ones where, they were feeling entitled for not having to problem solve, wanting answers and feeling entitled to that. And, one of the things that I've come up with personally was, at the end of the day, we're responsible for the success and failure of our team and company. And what that means is that, even if somebody tells you this is my passion, what I want to do, and if you are interviewing them and you see where they don't have that ability or they don't have that propensity to even learn that type of task or even be independent or not showing signs of being that
Hmm.
type of person, no matter how great that, because a lot of it, I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we hire out of our heart, which is probably one
Yes.
of the biggest reasons we don't get A players, right? We
Yeah.
see the underdog and we're rooting for the underdog. And at the end of the day, we want the underdog to succeed more than the underdog wants to succeed,
Yes.
right? And really owning that responsibility is, we're responsible for their failure if we bring them into our organization, right? Or if we
Hmm.
see that we brought them in immediately and they're not the kind to take initiative or not the kind that can think out of the box, or they get overly frustrated with that, you know, allowing us to part ways and being okay with that because at the end of the day, they're better off in the long run. We're better off in the long run going
Yes.
different directions. It was
Yeah.
one of the hardest lessons for me to learn.
I want to underscore what you said about accepting that we are responsible for their failure when we bring them in based on their potential. I always say if I could go back and rename Tap the Potential, I would do it in a heartbeat because we attract business owners who believe in the potential of all the other people in the world. And we all of us will extend opportunity after opportunity because certainly they're going to get it right this time. And that's how we end up keeping people on the team too long. And so one of the reasons that when I teach the How to Hire the Best course, I always start off with let's identify a clear role that you're hiring for, clear results you expect from the person, and then you design the whole hiring process around that. And so during the interview if they're hitting expectations, on day one if they're hitting or missing expectations. And if they're missing expectations on day one, why are you taking them to day two and day five? And that's really gets to what you just said about we have to own responsibility that we've set them up for failure because we've hired based on potential we see or don't see, but want to see, and not who they really are and what their strengths really are.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think it comes from the fact that many of us that are in our professions, we're used to being the underdog, right?
Yes.
We started our business with a 0% chance of success, right? Um, because, right, most businesses close after 5 years, and we've been blessed in many cases. And, there's a gratefulness with that to give back. And
Hmm.
reality is not everyone is made to do every role, and it's
No.
embracing that, understanding that, and moving on. And allowing them to be successful where they can be successful at.
Yeah. In all actuality, we need to understand that when we bring someone into a growing small business, that's very different than someone taking a job in the corporate world. There is so much more structure in the corporate world. And it takes a special entrepreneurial risk taker team member to come into a growing small business because they need to accept, hey, we've never hired for this role before. We think these are the expected results. Maybe not. And this could change as we go, as we learn more. And this may be the best way to do it, and it may not be. And we're going to be refining that as we go. And so that takes somebody who can be flexible, who can think on their feet, and who wants to be a part of creating a system and figuring out that trial by fire, figuring out what works versus someone who comes in and you have a very defined role and this is how we do it. And we know when you do it this way, these are the results that you're going to get. And we know that it takes about this many hours. That's a business that's further along in its development. And so we need to, when you're making that first hire, you need to hire somebody who can go with the flow. It can't be somebody who needs direction and handholding on every single thing because they're not going to be successful.
Oh yeah, like as soon as I get a resume and they said they've worked in the government for like 5 to 10 years, I'm like, you got to give me a 99 reasons to say yes on this one. Because
Yes.
reality is, they are used to an environment in a lot of cases where they don't have to change. They can follow status quo and keep things pretty consistent with that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
very good point on that. It's a different mentality when you're in a business that's 50 employees and less, because today you might be entry level, tomorrow you might be manager, and you might be running several departments,
Yes.
in about 5 years from now.
Yes, and for some A players who crave growth and opportunity, that is like amazing. Like, oh my gosh, you mean I could start at entry level and I could be on the leadership team in 2 years? Wow, sign me up. I'm all about that. And other people they don't even want to consider managing people, leading a team, creating systems. They just tell me what to do, and that's what I want to do. And those tend not to be the best team members in a growing small business.
Definitely. So this was like such an amazing conversation. And we're gonna have to bring you back because Dr. Sabrina, every time we have you on the show, you just drop juicy morsels, okay? Like it's just like woo, sizzling with so many juicy morsels, okay? And I'm sure like you guys that are listening are like, tell us more, tell us more. But as we wrap up today, Dr. Sabrina, one of the questions I love to ask our guests is if you could leave our viewers, our listeners with one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice be? And it can be business, it can be personal.
Okay, so this comes from my own experience when I was completely overwhelmed, like 18 years ago. And I didn't mention that I run the business on 25 hours a week, and I've done that for the last 18, 19 years. And people are always like, "Well, how do you do that? And you take 4 week vacations?" And it's because I've learned to focus on my $10,000 an hour activities, the high value activities that really move the business forward. And I make sure those happen. And I have intentionally delegated anything that is less than a $10,000 an hour activity. And so, one of the tips that I would give your listeners is to download my chart of $10,000 an hour activities because it's a real handy reference to see, well, what is a $50 an hour task or a $10 an hour task? What's a $1,000 an hour activity? And what's a $10,000 an hour activity? So, it's helpful to you. So, I say print it out, laminate it, put it behind your computer monitor so your eye falls on it, and you're constantly looking at what can I delegate? Because that helps you move towards the 4 week vacation. But it's also a tool to use with your team members because when you hire A players, they take on more and more responsibilities over time. They get overloaded, and everything that you've learned as you work on taking your 4 week vacation about delegating, they need to learn too. So you can teach them about the $10,000 an hour activities, get them sweeping off the $10, $100 an hour tasks off their plate, and get them focusing on $1,000 and $10,000 an hour activity. And now you are just magnifying the thought leadership and the profit potential in your business. So you can get that chart at tapthepotential.com/10K.
I love it. I love it. And what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to put that link in the show notes so that if you guys are driving, you don't have to pull over, get to a safe spot. Just go back to our show notes and then go ahead and click on that link to find out what your $10,000 an hour work is. And what a great way to really help your team members with prioritizing their time too. Should I be
Yes.
doing this or that? I need to be doing the one that produces the more results, right?
Yes.
What a great way to train them on that. Now, Dr. Sabrina, how do our viewers and listeners contact you? How do they reach you? How do they learn more about getting ready to take this 4 week vacation, getting ready to hire and really create A player teams, right? Because the more A players you have, the more profitable you're going to be because you're going to have to hire less
Yeah.
people to do the work. So,
Yeah.
how do they reach you to learn more and follow you and get more of this juicy wisdom that you have?
Okay. All right. So the first place is go to the Profit by Design podcast because I'm dropping these juicy nuggets all over the place every week. Once a week, you get an episode. And then you can go to our website, tapthepotential.com, and you can learn all about our Better Business, Better Life program where we support entrepreneurs in taking their 4-week vacation, working 25-hour work weeks. And we have some clients that do both. So that's where you can find me, tapthepotential.com.
I love it. Taptopotential.com. And I will go ahead and put all Dr. Sabrina's contact information in our show notes. Dr. Sabrina, as usual, you always drop like a wealth of wisdom. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
I'm delighted you asked great questions. And I know your listeners are going to take some of these ideas and really it's going to make a difference in their business. And I get excited about that. So I'm just delighted to be here today.
Thank you, Dr. Sabrina.